All right, let's bread up this chicken that we cut up. Got some chicken breast, got my plate, got my bowls and stuff. All right. Get about a half a cup of flour in here. You don't need a whole lot of flour because you're just going to be just doing an initial dusting with it. Breadcrumbs, that's a little bit of an extra story. You use a lot of breadcrumbs. They'll end up getting wet, and they get bigger as they get wet. Get that, I don't know. Looks like about a cup and a half. All right, don't forget your sanitizer rag. Gotta have that sucker with you at all time. All right, in the flour, I'm gonna put some Lorry salt in it. Lorry salt's pretty good stuff. Put a little bit more salt in the breadcrumbs. Put a little bit of black pepper in the flour. A little bit of black pepper in the breadcrumbs. Okay, Italian seasoning. You can buy the Italian breadcrumbs, but then they're only good for Italian stuff. So it just kind of defeats it. I think I put about a tablespoon in there for that. All right, a couple of eggs. The breading station usually consists of flour, egg wash, and breadcrumbs. Egg wash is not straight eggs. It's eggs with some water in it, diluted it down. Straight eggs is okay, but it's a little too thick. So we're gonna, I don't know, quarter cup of water. You just want a little binder, something that's gonna grab the flour. If it's too thick, it won't soak into the flour fast enough. We're going to put a little bit of that pink salt in the eggs. All right. If it's too thick, it won't grab the flour. And it'll just grab a bunch of breadcrumbs. You want it to be thin enough to dissolve into, hydrate into the flour. Guess I should have done this while it was dry, but that's all right. Mix all that stuff up. You don't want a big clump of salt. Same thing here. That's pretty much all the Italian breadcrumbs is Italian seasoning and the breadcrumbs. So might as well do that on your own and save the excess. All right. So when you're doing a breading station, make sure you have all your stuff all ready to go. One hand stays wet and one hand stays dry. Because if you don't, you end up with these big old fat club fingers with all this stuff on there and you just waste tons of stuff. So there's a couple ways to bread things. Depends on what you're going to do with it. So we got our chicken cutlet here. Put down inside there. You get a little bit of dry finger, wet fingers. Pick your hand and keep it. Alright, so if you're going to saute something, you flour it. And that's it. But you want to take the excess flour off, because if it doesn't stick to the food, it's just going to burn off in your pan as soon as you put it in the pan. All right. So when you're taking your flour for breading, you can dip it in the egg wash. Again, keep your hand dry. Flip it over. So when it's just floured, you can do stuff for sautéing like piccata and stuff like that. If you're doing stuff like a francaise, which is really pretty good stuff, you do flour and egg wash. Yuck. Look like tuna. You do flour and egg wash, and that makes a nice little eggy outside. So you don't want it to be soaking wet, but see how that absorbed the flour? Now you can get it into your breadcrumbs. When you get it in your breadcrumbs, give it a good packing down. Get plenty on there. I mean, you want to bread it. So this works pretty much for anything you want to bread. Fish, shrimp, chicken, pork chops, breaded pork chops. And there you go. It's a nice little bread thing there. We'll set that off to the side. Now if you want to do chicken strips, same thing as that with chicken strips. Chicken fingers is like that as well. It all depends on what you want to do with it. Let that in there. Give it a flip over. Let it hydrate into that flour. Sometimes you'll see the flour in there underneath of a bubble. It's not getting wet. Get it wet. If it's too thick, it'll just cake on the outside of the flour. And then when you cut into it, all the breading will come off and leave you with a big chunk of meat. So pretty good, huh? So we'll go ahead and bread these up real fast. Always keep that right, one hand dry, one hand wet. Me, I'm right-handed, so it's easier for me to do it this way. Of course, you can put larger containers, put more amounts in there at a time. Get 3 or 4 pieces of chicken in the flour at a time. You can double batter it too. You can dip it, then go back in the flour, which is used for some recipes, but not many. Give it a little shake. You notice how we're not using a whole lot of flour, so you end up wasting a lot if you do too much flour. Fish is good like this too. I love fish fried. I want to bread these up. End up freezing a few of them for later. There's that chicken finger. And if you had diced up, you could throw a handful of it in the flour and do the chunks. You know, 10, 15 chunks at a time. You definitely don't want to crowd the pan too much, because when you grab it all out, when it's got the flour on it, it'll get all sticky. It'd be like a glob of it. Then when you dip it into the egg wash, it gets even worse. And then when it's all thick and sticky like that, and you put it in the breadcrumbs, it just makes a mess and absorbs too much into the breadcrumbs, and you end up with just a big pile of stickiness. And then when you pull it apart, it all comes apart on there. And since these are breaded already, you can stack them. And we want to do drumsticks, thighs, fried chicken for chicken dinners and stuff like that. It's the same process. Shrimp's the same process. Shrimp is good just floured and let it sit for about an hour. When it gets really sticky, the protein will bind with the flour. last one. And it don't matter if it's not a pretty piece of chicken, it's still chicken. Chicken's great. So now you see right here, I got a little bit that didn't get wet. You can tap that with some of it here and there, and then put your breadcrumbs on it. And there we have it. Not bad, huh? All right. Don't forget, it's chicken. Get your sanitizer rag. Make sure you clean everything good, sanitize everything, because you can't wash the bacteria. You gotta kill it.